And we believe your valuable ideas will be very helpful to a lot of students who joining this class. So is it okay to hear any ideas from?
Sure, I'd be happy to leave that up to Dr. Watts, what order you think makes more sense. Personally, I think I'd love to hear your presentation first, but up to you guys.
Okay. Fair enough. Bonnie was saying earlier that he's very well aware of HR management, so feel free to go ahead and present yourselves, Mr. Kim, and the executives, the visiting professors will comment later on. And as we go through it, anybody can ask questions and discuss details as we go through. Thanks. Go ahead, Mr. Kim.
So we will start our presentation now. Is it okay?
Yes.
Let's start, Jiwan-seo.
Hello everyone, my name is Ji-hwan-seo and my team members are Hyun-hak Do and Gun-soo Kim, and today we're going to present about recruitment and selection procedures, human resource management. In human resource management. Next slide. So this is our table of contents. We're going to discuss about human resource planning, job posting, the selection process, equal opportunity commission, 8 steps of selection process, overall selection process, Samsung and Hyundai. Next slide. So human resource planning is necessary before recruitment. There are 4 parts in human resource planning: analyzing labor supply, forecasting labor demand, balancing labor demand with supply, developing and implementing a plan. Analyzing labor supply is to identify the company's current human resources supply. The HR department studies the strength of the organization based on the number of employees, positions, benefits, their skills and performance levels in this step. Forecasting labor demand is outlining the future of a company's workforce. In this part, the HR department can consider issues like promotions, layoffs, transfers, and retirement. The human resource department can also look at other factors that can affect labor demand, such as development of new technology that could increase or decrease the demand of workers. Balancing labor demand with supply is creating gap analysis that lays out specific needs to narrow the supply of the company's labor versus future demand, which includes some questions like, should employers learn new skills? Does the company need more managers? Do all employees play to their strengths in their current roles? Developing and implementing a plan is the final part of HRP process, and HR should take practical steps to integrate its plan with the rest of the company in this step. The department requires the ability to implement the plan, a budget, and a collaborative effort with all departments to execute the plan. Next slide. So there are many ways in job posting. We will introduce 6 methods. They are using social network service, TV ads, campus exploration, post to job sites, internal recruitment, and revisit rejections. Social network service and TV ads post to job sites are basically what it says. Campus exploration is exploring campus to find students who are interested in joining the company. Internal recruitment is recruiting employees who are already in the company. This way is very effective since the employees already know the system of the company. Revisiting rejections is to reach out to the ones who got rejected from a company. This way is very effective since the applicants were already interested in the company. Next slide. The objective of the selection process is to choose the individual who can successfully perform the job from the pool of qualified candidates. Job analysis, human resource planning, and recruitment are necessary prerequisites to the selection process. The whole exercise might be called a rejection exercise, but it has a positive outcome in terms of the appropriate personnel selected. Although the sequence of steps may vary from organization to organization and from one job to from one job opening to another, the selection process could determine the candidates who are likely to be successful and eliminate those likely to fail. The U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, is responsible for enforcing federal laws that make it illegal to discriminate against a job applicant or an employee because of the person's race, color, religion, sex, including pregnancy, transgender status, and sexual orientation, national origin, age, 40 or older, disability, or genetic information. Most employers with at least 15 employees are covered by EEOC laws, 20 employees in age discrimination cases. Most labor unions and employment agencies are also covered. The laws apply to all types of work situations, including hiring, firing, promotions, harassment, training, wages, and benefits. Here are the selection process preliminary interview: receiving applicants, screening of applicants, employment tests, interview, reference checking, medical examination, and then final selection. Applicants can be rejected in employment tests, interview, reference checking, and medical examination if found unsuitable. A preliminary interview is usually conducted after the applicant has completed the applicant form. It is generally a brief exploratory interview that is normally conducted by a specialist from the Human Resource Department. The interview screens out unqualified or uninterested applicants. Common questions include, why do you want this job? What experience and education prepared you for this job? When are you available to start? Sometimes they will ask about salary expectations too. The candidates who succeed in preliminary interviews are required to fill in a specially drafted blank application form. It provides a written record of the qualifications, experience, age, and etc. of candidates. It can be used as a good test device for the expression, handwriting, and other abilities of the candidates. Therefore, it should be designed carefully so as to secure all relevant information about the candidate. There's no standard form of blank application for all firms. As far as possible, it should be as simple and brief.
Hi, my name is Hanakdo. I'm going to continue the presentation. So once the field application is brought to the screening committee, it checks the details and calls the candidate for selection test. The purpose of this screening test is also to weed out the suitable candidates, as spending time on them means waste of money. To have an effective choice among the applicants, HR managers score the applicants throughout weighted application forms which assign different weights to different questions. And with these forms, since thousands of people apply for the job and there are limitations in time and money, applicant tracking software is used to filter the applicants. An applicant tracking software is a type of software used by recruiters during the selection process to collect, sort, scan, and rank the job applications they receive for their open positions. The ATS parses a resume's contents into categories and then scans it for specific keywords to determine if the job application should be passed along to the recruiters. Its job is to essentially weed out unqualified applicants so the recruiter can devote his or her time to evaluating the candidates who are more likely to be a match for a position. And when the filtering is done, the candidates are required to have some tests for HR managers to check the aerial knowledge of candidates for the respective jobs. This test enables the managers to bring out right type of people for the jobs. Since the basic interview can be unreliable as applicants can perform well at interview but not have qualities or skills needed for a job, the selection test increased chances of choosing best applicants and so minimize high cost of recruiting wrong people And the following tests are given to candidates in most cases, which are intelligence, aptitude, and proficiency tests. Proficiency test is designed to determine the skills and knowledge acquired by an individual through experience and on-the-job training. And there are 4 types of proficiency tests. And after the test, the managers are going to have an interview with filtered candidates to get more information from the candidates. In this step, we could find several formats of interview, which is called structured interview, semi-structured interview, situational, and unstructured interview. Structured interview is conducted using a predetermined outline. It provides same type of information on all interviewees and allows systemic coverage of all questions deemed necessary by the organization. And semi-structured interview is that the interviewer prepares the major questions in advance, but has the flexibility to use techniques such as proving to help assess the applicant's strengths and weaknesses. Situational interview uses projective techniques to put the prospective employee in action situations that might be encountered on the job. An unstructured interview is an interview conducted without a predetermined checklist of questions. They use open-ended questions and provide a more relaxed atmosphere. An interview is regarded as an important thing because it gives the recruiter an opportunity to assess subjective aspects of candidates. Interviewers can know about candidates' enthusiasm and intelligence. Interviewers can ask questions which were not a part of his application. And also they can obtain as much information from candidates as possible about his economic, social, and cultural background. And it gives facts about the policies, procedures, and culture of the company so that the candidates feel good about joining the company. And there are other types of interviewing techniques, and so please take a look at it. And after that, to conduct effective interviews, careful attention must be given in selecting and training interviewers. The plan for the interview should include an outline specifying the information to be obtained and the questions to be asked. The plan should also include room arrangements, privacy, and some degree of comfort. The interviewer shouldn't forget to attempt to put the applicants at ease. The facts obtained in the interview should be recorded, and the effectiveness of interviewing process should be evaluated. And after the interview is done, managers are needed to check the references after that the interviewees have said, because those who are job hungry can be prone to little exaggeration. To have a credibility of information, reference check is mandatory for the company. And physical examinations are frequently conducted and used for differential placement purposes rather than rejection of applicants. Physical examination helps in effective manpower utilization by stressing differential placement involving assessment of an individual's capacities and matching them with several job possibilities in the organizational setting. So physical examinations are of the utmost significance in selective or differential placement. A physical examination serves the following purposes. It gives an indication regarding fitness of the candidate for the job concerned. It discovers existing disabilities and obtain a record thereof, which may be helpful later in deciding the company's responsibility. And in the events of workman's compensation claim, it helps preventing employment of those suffering from some type of contagious diseases. It helps in placing those who are otherwise employable but whose physical handicaps may necessitate assignments only to specified jobs. And finally, for the final selection decision, based on all information gathered during the recruitment and selection processes, including resumes, interviews, test results, applicant ratings, reference checks, and the advice of the selection team, decide which candidate best satisfies the pre-established requirements of the vacancy. So So here I will briefly discuss about the overall recruitment and selection process in regard of the two big companies in Korea, which is Samsung and Hyundai. With my findings, hope this is helpful to those who are interested in those two companies. And first, you should know in what position you're applying for, and then next, analyze the criteria and qualification of applying position. So for Hyundai, the 2021 eligible candidates must need to complete their graduation of engineering and have a degree from any institution or university for the entry-level engineers. This order applies to Samsung company. Before apply, be sure to check the job descriptions and double check the eligibility criteria, then make sure you're familiar with all those details. It is good to know about your specialty and thinking about how to utilize your skills to obtain a certain position, and this will be the most fundamental approach in the job recruitment market. Next, you should submit the application form through the online. However, so many candidates fail to make one or happen to get rejected. Applicant screening is the process of reviewing applicant resumes and cover letters. On average, job opening receives 250 resumes and up to 88% of them are considered unqualified. This means a recruiter can spend up to so many times like 23 hours screening resumes for a single hire. The usual solution for the volume problem is using an applicant tracking system, but let's define what is good and bad application form not to be filtered by ATS. So first of all, here are the bad examples. Maybe this contains some humors, but well, it seems so bad that I also left, but I cannot even describe well. So his
Hey, who
statement
gave
is
you my letter? I thought my letter was supposed to be confidential.
so his statement is not matching with the objective. So irrelevant with the targeting positions and not serious about his application and work experiences don't have any relations and nothing to do with the job that he was looking for. Then what are the components that the recruiters expect from applicant form? These are the key points: the great format and layout, legibility, organized in text and no grammatical errors, and the information is well tailored to the job. Last but not least, form should not too colorful. So on the right, it specifies clearly what position he is applying for and describes important skills he possessed and historical work experiences. This information goes well with the goal and clearly specifies how one's performance can attribute to the firm. Researching and finding about idealistic features, what companies are looking for, will be helpful to proceed to the next step. Next, when the application form has been accepted, then the candidate needs to qualify all those tests and interview rounds to get the final placement offer from the company, and it differs from company to company. So here's for both Samsung and Hyundai, and as you can see, they have slight difference in their test procedures. For Samsung, they came up with the own-made test, GSAT, but like many companies, Hyundai also proceeds with the aptitude test to look at an individual's capacity in a particular area. In both companies, interestingly, do the group discussion among the candidates on free topic to assess each individual's performances. And lastly, they take a both non and technical interview to assess technical knowledge, skills, and abilities as they relate to the needs of specific job that candidates are applying to. As you can see, when it comes to technical interviews, difficulty level intensifies. Therefore, applicants should be thoroughly prepared for the job-related questions and develop their competencies through the study related to the position they apply for. So here is the 7 most frequently asked questions, such as why should we hire you? Although there are the many types of interviewing techniques, it is always good to prepare basic answers, such as 1 or 2 academic subjects. But also remember that when doing interview, be true and sure about your resume and research about the company. By preparing answers, you will be more confident during the interview, and the most fundamental key of success in interview is being confident. So don't you forget that.
Interview is basically to test one's professional attitude, confidence, patience, and a smile are the key to clearing this round, and it's good to be aware of the most commonly asked questions. But it is not advisable to learn the answers only by heart. So please take some tips, but always frame your own work, own answers. By keeping in mind of these tips, you may be able to come up with the more structured answers, and also the more you go through interview, the more confidently you can attend interview, so don't be afraid. When all the tests and interviews are done, then the final decision will be made by hiring managers. Through the Hyundai selection processes and also Samsung selection processes, value judgment in the final decisions are improved when previous tests have been properly performed. However, remember that the job recruitment is not just one-way directional, which means that the both parties, companies, and applicants should be all benefited from this action. For the effective recruitment in the company, the recruitment activity should be concerned with satisfying the needs of job and candidates by offering the job that matches with applicants' specialty and knowledge of the field. So this way, the turn down rate will be decreased and chance of retaining the individual will be more possible. Also, for the applicant view, they adapt better when they know what they're working in and satisfied with their job. After passing through a considerable number of periods and procedures, then the job is offered. Initial offer of a job needs special care and particularly as regards the following points. Should not be differentiated with the salary. Second, the special condition regarding on the job should be stated. And essential condition of employment should also be known. And lastly, the next stage should be clearly defined to the successful candidate. So here is what I wanted to say, you guys. Even though the COVID-19 hits the world, the job recruiting is still ongoing. So therefore, the continuous preparation for all those selection processes I think will bring benefits to you when it comes to job recruitment. So thank you for listening, and so hope we don't lose our confidence. So here's the questions that we come up with, and anyone who would like to answer for these questions first or first?
Let's go through and find out if any students have questions about this first of all. And then very quickly, we will get some comments from Mr. Nam and Mr. Guzman about their experiences with interviewing and selection or even job design. So first of all, are there any students in class that have any questions about this presentation before we get into those details from Mr. Kim and Mr. So? Don't see any hands up yet.
I think not only related to this question, just any question is fine. So.
Okay, let's go forward and thank you for presenting about the initial idea of how companies deal with not only job advertisements, but selection and recruitment of employees and dealing with equal opportunity. There's many issues that you talked about. Let's open it up to Bonnie. Would you like to start introducing yourself, Bonnie, and maybe say a couple of words?
Yeah, sure. I was taking some notes during the presentation, so I got quite a few things I'd like to share. So I have my first 7 years out of college, I worked at an HR consulting firm. I started at the bottom as an operations assistant, and I made my way up to becoming the director of operations. For those of you who are familiar with operations, in any company, but particularly in an HR company that did organizational strategy, strategic management, recruitment, executive search, and placement. Operations is basically the arm that flexes when the company makes a decision. So everything funneled through the operations department, and I was exposed through the entire life cycle of a candidate. Once that candidate had been sourced either through campus recruitment or monster.com or LinkedIn data mining or whatnot. So I can speak about so many subjects in a lot of depth, but I wanna ask a very fundamental question. And it is, what is the most important asset of all companies that they all share? The most important asset, not you,
Connection
Sean.
to me.
Can anyone say what the most important asset is?
Employees who work for the company and brings money to the company.
You're getting close. I'm talking about something a little more fundamental than that. So yes, you're right. People. Without people, there's no company, for sure. But at the more core and fundamental aspect of people is intellectual capital. Because you could hire a bunch of the wrong people. You could hire a bunch of farmers for a company that makes semiconductors, and that company is not going to succeed. What's going to define the success is the intellectual capital that that company brings in through this whole recruitment process that you just outlined. So you have to cultivate the kind of intellectual capital that you bring in. Now, you explained a lot about, what kind of process, and then there's technical questions in the interview and all that. And I'll tell you, I probably interviewed thousands of people throughout my career, either as applicants or people that I would hire into my team. And I have seen it all. I have seen people who are, I mean, they should be working in Broadway. People who have done their homework, they read the history of the company, they know the position in and out. They probably have friends that worked in my company and asked all kinds of questions, and they felt so natural. And they would give an exceptional performance. They would give me music to my ears. Everything I wanted to hear in somebody I wanted to work side by side with me. And after that person is hired, it ends up being a flop. And you're going to encounter that. I guarantee you, you're going to have those people. So how do you determine during the recruitment process, how do you filter out those exceptional performers? And I'll tell you, yeah, it requires a lot of experience. Somebody who has gone through it all, at some point you're able to detect that. But before that, like for example, case questions. You cannot fake a case question, because a case study question requires for you to think your process to come up with the answer, and you have to do it out loud right there in the moment. Like a very common question that is thrown out there for consulting positions is, why are manholes round? I don't know if many of you have heard of that question. Not you, Sean.
Nobody
You know manholes? Manholes are the holes that you see on the street where municipal workers go down there to take care of the city piping, the drainage, or whatever. So I heard all kinds of answers to that. Oh, and can maybe two people can volunteer a couple of answers to why are manholes round? Alonso.
Can I get a student to comment? Yi Ju-young, how about you? Would you like to comment? Why do you think manhole covers are round?
Because the round shape is the easiest to save the material to make that.
Okay, good comment. Felix, I see your hand up. Go ahead, Felix.
I think it's that the round shape is so that the topping don't fall into it. So it's so the shape is so that it don't fall into it. So in every position it doesn't fall into it, because the diameter is bigger than their inside from the manhole.
Okay. All right. I've heard all kinds of things. I've heard saying that when the cover is round, it's easy to roll and transport. That if it's round, it won't fall through the hole. Yeah, I've heard the couple of answers that you guys gave me. And that's, I mean, I myself didn't have the answer because there is no answer to this. But it took me years to kind of come up with my own answer. And my answer is manholes are round because the hole is round. And the reason why holes are round is because if you're going to be digging holes throughout the world, and I'm talking about hundreds of millions of holes, what is the most effective way of drilling a hole? With a drill. And what's the hole that a drill leaves behind? It's round. So that is kind of like an engineering approach to explaining such a, this is a very common question, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of you are gonna stumble into this. So yes, and there's gonna be a lot more complicated questions to these. Like once I was interviewing for McKinsey, and they give me a case question where they tell me that there's a company that is experiencing a high employee turnover. Can you identify what's the root cause? And then he tells me, you can ask me any questions. So, okay, so I ask, is the manager a jerk? No. Are the salaries below market? No. In fact, we have the best compensation in the market. Okay. Is the work infrastructure and the resources the employees are given not good? No, we have state of the art. So I keep asking all these questions, and at the end of the day, I didn't have an answer. And this is the McKinsey consultant, and I asked him, so what's the answer? And he tells me, we've been hiring the wrong people. It goes back to what I said at the beginning, is intellectual capital is so important, but when you bring people with the wrong skill set to an organization to do a job to which they're not prepared to deliver, their morale is going to go down. Their evaluations are going to go down. Their end of the year bonus is probably going to be zero. And ultimately, people are going to find out this is not the right place for me, which brings me to the next thing. And all that process that you just talked about, it lacks one thing: fit. How do you know if an individual is the right fit for your organization? And at this point, we're going to be talking about qualitative elements of the individual and of the organization. A lot of American companies, especially Silicon Valley, is notorious for being a highly of having highly individualistic cultures, where there's a tremendous amount of accountability and empowerment at the individual level, whereas companies like Hyundai and Samsung, they are more collectivistic, right? Where a lot of the accountability is kind of spread across everybody, which at the end of the day, it means that nobody's accountable. But for some reason, teamwork is sparked from that kind of environment, for so long as you bring in the people that have the right cultural aspects that can accommodate that kind of work environment. So fit is important, not just individual qualities to the organization, but also to the team, Let me give you an example. So I used to work for Apple before I came to Samsung. And when I came to Samsung, people asked me, so how was it like to work at Apple? And I usually tell them two things. The difference between working at Apple and Samsung is that Apple was a very well orchestrated symphony. Everything had its place. All the individuals knew exactly where they were in the matrix organization, and they did not deviate from their role because Apple hires specialists who know a particular subject and they know it deep. Whereas at Samsung hires a lot of generalists. And I'm talking about at the sales and marketing organization where I belong. of course, if you're an engineer and you go to R&D, you are a specialist. But on the business management side, Samsung hires a lot of generalists. So Samsung, when you have a bunch of generalists and all of a sudden the company decides to, for example, venture into the world of IoT, something that nobody has any experience because it's a new field, and you have a bunch of generalists, it's a little chaotic. So it's more like a jazz orchestra. There's a lot of chaos going on because it takes a while for all these generalists to kind of find their rhythm, right, in that chaos. And not everybody is cut out to work in that kind of environment. So those are two extreme examples of two world-leading consumer electronic organizations, that one being individualistic, the other one being collectivist. For some reason, they hired the people that fit into that culture, and they were able to get to the highest levels of business leadership in the world in their respective fields. That's just an example. Fit is important, and fit, I would say, trumps so many other elements, including education, including degrees. Why? Silicon Valley, right now, leading companies like Apple and Google no longer require for you to have a college degree, not even a high school degree, because what they're looking for right now is skills, not degrees, not GPA, not exam scores or aptitude tests. They are looking for specific skills, because ultimately, when you get hired, you're not going to come and hang your diploma in front of your desk that demonstrates your ability to contribute. What's going to contribute at the end of the day is the skill set that you bring to the particular role that you were hired for in that particular organization, with that particular team, with that particular manager. Because the one person that's going to have the biggest impact in your life is going to be your manager. You're going to spend more time of your working hours being influenced by your manager's style of dealing with people. And I've done a study on turnover, employee turnover, and the number one reason why people leave their job is their manager. So yeah, I mean, if at some point we ever get to talk about, how do you improve employee turnover, that is an entire field in itself. And it always circles back into employer branding, right? If you've heard of employer branding, it's basically, what do companies do to understand what the labor market is looking for in an employer? And there are rankings, by the way. I've worked with this company called Universum. They're based out of Sweden. Every year they publish a ranking list of employer brands. And Samsung ranks in the last spot. In the top 50 spots, we rank last. And I have put some proposals forward to improve that. But at the end of the day, to change an employer brand, the company has to undergo fundamental change at the DNA level. It's not just about coming up with competitive salaries or benefits or like an amazing state-of-the-art office. Yes, sure, those elements contribute into employer branding. But when you have a culture that makes you work 12 hours a day, making sure that you come in on weekends, where there's no clear career track for you, at some point, no matter how good the salary is, people will leave because they will burn out. So, I mean, I'm talking far more into like an employee progression, an employee life cycle. But the recruitment element, I would say, is not even the beginning. You have to make sure that you are sourcing candidates in the right place. You're not going to go to an engineering school to look for marketers, for example. right? So you're not going to put a job description that asks for skills that you can only get from somebody that has 10 years of professional work experience, but you're recruiting at an undergrad liberal arts college, right? So sourcing the talent is very important, but you need to make sure that it is in line with the job requirements. And even going further on that, you have to make sure that the salary is competitive to that. Because if you don't have a competitive salary, let's say, for example, an investment bank every year, they usually hire entry-level investment bankers. The entry-level salary is about, I don't know, now I think it should be probably between $80,000 to $100,000, and they make you work probably over 100 to 110 hours a week. I have several of my friends who got hired in New York to work as entry-level investment bankers. The salary was high, but the cost of living in New York is really high. But when you look at the amount of hours that they worked, he came down to having an hourly wage of about $12 an hour. So the salary, you cannot look at it just from an absolute number. You have to look at it relative to the amount of work that you're going to be putting in, the amount of output that you're going to bring to the company, and of course the cost of living of whatever the position is going to be based out of. The most fundamental thing that you need to keep in mind is if these people that you're sourcing are aligned with the company's core values, corporate core values. So it ventures a little bit into the philosophical, but for example, Samsung's core values are people, excellence, change, integrity, and prosperity. Those are the pillars that basically define the mission statement that becomes our constitution to everything that we choose to do. Let me give you an example of a company that recruits in a single dimensional mindset. I don't know if you guys have heard of this book called The Smartest Guys in the Room. No. Okay, so this is a book about a company called Enron. It was a huge scandal back in the 1990s. This company was making a tremendous amount of money. It was a blue chip. It was the crown jewel of Wall Street. They only hired Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, Ivy League school, MBAs with the top grades. I mean, they only hired sharks. So what happens when you put a bunch of sharks in one room whose only motivation is to make money at all costs? Because that was the alpha culture of the company, is that ultimately these people started making so many corrupt decisions, engaging in fraud, that there were no checks and balances, and ultimately the company collapsed, and the CEO and many of the executives went to jail. This is a company that had the smartest guys in the industry, but they were driven by a single focus, but they were driven by the wrong set of values. It was all about profit and self-gain. It was not about service to the customers. It was not about service to the community. Interesting book, because that book became a case study for many business schools thereafter. So I know I've covered a lot of ground, but I want to go back into the whole recruitment process. Is that this process cannot be driven by a single person. Sure, there are some things that the HR administrator collects, like for example, the CV, the transcripts, some test scores, recommendation letters. That's just administrative work. But then you have to have multiple evaluators. It cannot be a single person. That's why you have to have a full 360 process with multiple people, not only including HR and the hiring manager, but also the team members whom you're going to be working with. And then there's going to be some stakeholders for the position. Like, for example, when I got hired at Apple, I went through 8 rounds of interview. 8. My position was that of program manager for retail. But why am I finding myself being interviewed by the controller, who is the equivalent of the regional CFO? Why am I being interviewed by the head of marketing or the head of sales when my position is retail? And the reason is this: once I would have been hired for that position, which I ultimately did, my position influenced everybody else's performance. I contributed to everybody else's success in some way, either directly or indirectly. They became my internal stakeholders, and they had skin in the game, because if my position was filled for somebody who didn't understand their sensibilities, then they were going to suffer. So they threw all kinds of questions at me, a lot of the same questions. You know, why do I want to work at Apple? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? A lot of repetition. And I'll tell you, these people, is not like they went to a back room and they started comparing notes, like cross-examination, like, you know, when lawyers are asking the same questions across multiple times just to make sure, where did I mess up? No, they all cared about themselves. How is this guy going to help me succeed? And ultimately, everybody has like a scorecard that has different qualities: teamwork, achievement, ability to work in teams, ability to work to deal with ambiguity. And then there's a score, like from 1 through 5 in each row. And then you put a score, like let's say 3 here, 4 here, 5 here, 3. And then you tabulate all that, and each interviewer ends up with a final score. Let's say the maximum score would have been 50. And okay, so evaluator 1 gave me a 40. Evaluator 2 gave me a 35. Evaluator 3 gave me a 49. And then you add all of them up, and you come up with, this is basically, you're quantifying a lot of qualitative elements during the entire interview process. And what you do after you interview, let's say 10 candidates, you end up basically narrowing it down to the, let's say, the 3 highest scores, the candidates with the 3 highest scores. And then you bring those in for a final interview, and which is usually a committee, for example. And then in that committee, it's like one of those congressional testimonies in the US, where you have a bunch of people just drilling at you. They throw everything at you. They want to make sure that you can walk, chew, and think at the same time while being shot at. It's incredibly stressful. But if you survive that barrage of fire, and you do it with confidence, without hesitating, you get hired. If out of those 3 finalists, not one of them survived, maybe we'll revisit the next 3 in line with the next 3 high scores. But I'll tell you, this process is so rigorous, and it touches so many individuals, that it is, in a sense, you're basically looking for who gets the highest average score in a process where multiple people are scrutinizing you. So, so that is probably some of the most intense interviewing that I have ever done. But once I came into my role was to basically hire 800 retail associates across all of Latin America, because that was the region that I managed. And I developed a process similar to that, not as extensive, similar to that, to hire these recruitment consultants that we would ultimately end up putting at the store level, because they would be the face of Apple to the customer. These were customer-facing representatives, and they needed to be the living incarnation of what people expect of Apple in an interaction. They expect excellence. They expect depth of knowledge. They expect soft touch in customer service. They expect resourcefulness. If you ask them a very technical question and they don't know the answer, they will say, let me get back to you. May I have your email or your phone number, and I'll get back to you by the end of today. You know, fit is important, and that is a question that every evaluator has throughout the whole process. Looking at your resume is not going to give you that answer. Looking at your GPA is not going to give you the answer whether this guy fits in my team. He might have all the skill sets, but is there going to be good chemistry? I have worked in some incredible teams where me and my teammates, we could almost finish each other's sentences, and it was incredible. And I have worked in teams where people just wouldn't say a word. It's like getting them to speak out their opinion in a closed meeting, to be creative and come up with ideas. It was like pulling teeth, you know. So at that point, the manager who is tasked with assembling that team ultimately is held accountable. And that's why managers have the tough decision to hire and fire, because how they assemble that team ultimately is going to define the level of success that that team is going to generate. That's why fit is important. And this is a mixture of everything: personality, obsession with the particular role. If you're going to hire, for example, a financial analyst, you need to make sure that this person is obsessed about having numbers organized, of knowing exactly how to produce very complex pivot tables, graphs, do forecasts. Somebody who doesn't just know the theory and has done it, but somebody who is the living incarnation of somebody who is obsessed with it, because that person is always going to go that one step further than the other guy who got an A+ in financial analysis, but walks out of his desk at 5 o'clock p.m. every day because he's only coming to the office to get a salary. He's not coming to the office to make a change. All right, so I just rambled on for a long time, and I'm gonna cut it short here to see if any of you have any questions. This was disorganized because I just kind of wanted to share as much as I could in a short amount of time.
Thank you very much for that. Let's see if we have some student questions or comments about that. Any students want to put up your hands or your hand icon, make a comment or question? I definitely have some questions or comments. Okay, Mr. Jiwan So, I saw sort of your hand up. Go ahead and ask your point.
During the interview in Apple, if there is an applicant who is not fit for the company yet but have maybe good potential, do they kind of hire them and help them grow in the company?
It is implied that everybody who is given an offer has potential. Not only can you execute on the requirements of the job description, but that you're going to take it to the next level. One of the questions, so when I interview candidates and then at the end I ask them if they have any questions, they ask me, how is it like to work here? And my answer has always been, we're looking for the best candidate in the entire world for this role. And if that person happens to be in London or in Johannesburg, and that person applied and he happens to be the best one, we will do whatever it takes to move that person over to the US, give him a visa, help him with the relocation. That's how important talent was. When I was hired at Apple, I was living in Washington, DC. And when they gave me the job offer, they relocated me. Now, this was the regional headquarters for Latin America based out of Miami. Latin America, why did they hire a Korean? Well, I happen to have been born and raised in Latin America. And I speak Spanish and Portuguese. And a lot of the qualities that I had from my past background were very relevant to this particular role. Could they have hired a guy from, like a guy from Colombia or Mexico? Maybe. But if that person didn't apply, Apple would have never known. So within the pool of candidates, the finalists, because I got hired, I guess I delivered the best answers to my interview. But I was scrutinized impressively. And when people ask me what type of people work at Apple, I usually tell them there's two kinds. There's alphas, and then there's the people that can deal with alphas. If you are neither, if you are a beta, you're gonna get chewed out and they're gonna spit out your bones. If you walked into a room in a meeting and you just are not prepared to deal with the barrage of scrutiny that your colleagues are gonna throw at you, ultimately you get squeezed out. It's a bloodbath, but that's what makes it very rewarding, because in that environment, the level of competition was so high that it pushed me to always want to become better. Because I knew that if at some point Apple found out that there was somebody out there who is better than me, I was going to get replaced by the person who is now the new world's best candidate for my role.
We see a question from Felix. Are you ready for another question, Bonnie?
Yeah, sure.
Felix, go ahead.
Maybe a more personal question. Why did you then change from Apple to Samsung? Was it because of the high pressure, or maybe also to Alonso? Why did you come to Samsung? Maybe that's a more personal question, but if you want to answer, I would be happy.
So, okay, so let me go first, since I was talking. For me, there were two reasons. One, I worked at a regional headquarters, and I mean, this is something that I even wrote in my MBA admissions application essay, that I wanted to work at a global headquarters in a company, in a global leading company that makes bridges between Asia, the US, and Latin America. And when Samsung came and they recruited me, actually they data mined me out of LinkedIn. They reached out to me. I wasn't even applying for jobs. And at the beginning, I said no, because I was really happy at Apple. And I said no, and Samsung kept insisting, until one day I was like, okay, fine. Let me hear what you have to say to me. And the offer that they gave me was one that I just couldn't refuse. They gave me a global leadership role. The opportunity for me to move from one leading company to another leading company that had a bigger market share, I considered it to be a step up. And of course, for personal reasons as well. So from a compensation and benefits, I mean, it was a significant step up as well. As I mentioned to you before, the number one reason why employees leave their job is their manager. And in my case, in the 3 years that I worked there, I went through 4 managers. And the last one was not the best person to work for, which gave me also a push incentive for me to want to go and start new. Alonso.
Thank you for that. Alonso, what about you? Do you have some comments to share about why you joined Samsung and about HR?
Yeah, sure. The first one is on why I joined Samsung, and the reason is I was still a student at Duke when they offered me the opportunity to apply. So the job that I had, if you remember from the last class, was on not Samsung Electronics, it was Samsung Group. So from there, I thought that the position gave me a good opportunity to work with semiconductor, with mobile, with Samsung Life Insurance. So several subsidiaries. In that sense, I thought it was a good way to learn a lot about different industries. As for comments on HR, unfortunately, it looks like we only have about 10 minutes, so I'll try to keep it short. But some of the things that I have learned, while I haven't had the opportunity to interview thousands of applicants that Boni has, I've interviewed a few dozen, and these were to join my immediate team. And so some of the, I guess when I first joined, it was only 4 rounds. It was only 4 rounds, but all of those were case interviews, similar to what Boni talked about with the manhole cover, but a little bit more detailed than that. You get lots of numbers, and then this is what your business is performing like, what recommendation would you give? You make a presentation at the end. So for those case studies later, when I moved into a role at Samsung in which we were able to bring people onto the team, some of the points that Mr. Kim and Mr. So's presentation covered, I thought were very relevant to what I experienced. For example, you talked about the importance of tailoring the application. One of the things I noticed is that, yeah, some people don't do that. They'll just, you can tell just by reading, after reading tons of applications, you can tell that this is the exact same one that they sent for companies. To the point where some people would even put in, I would like to get hired into Google. You know, this is not Google, this is Samsung. So really important point. I know you had in your presentation, just want to stress that one out. Other thing that we noticed is that people that had really strong resumes and that performed really well on the case studies ended up being poor performers in a strategy consulting team at Samsung because they just didn't have good collaboration abilities. So the company changed their interviewing process in the past few years to try to compensate for that. And they started including the group activity, which basically somebody watches you interact with other members in solving a case study, and then they see how well you collaborate with others. Do you give them an opportunity to speak? Do you value their feedback? So all of these kind of things are pretty important and looked at. But we also noticed that there were some people that are able to fake it for the interview process and then get in, and then you see their true colors. So that raised a lot of questions. So personally, I'll share some of the 4 things that I looked at, which will help you when you're evaluating resumes, or it may help you when you apply to companies that you're looking at. So the first one would be when I'm looking at a resume, a lot of people tend to put responsible for this or oversaw this department. That doesn't tell you much because that just basically their job description. So one of the things that helps to look at would be what they accomplished while they were in that position. Specifically, I've tried to see what did people accomplish that was not part of their job description. Some of the answers that I think have been very impressive to me would be, for example, when someone said, you know, in my position, I dealt with a lot of outside consultants. I also created a database that ranks these outside consultants to help whoever takes my role afterwards understand which ones are the best ones for which area. So an answer like that, I thought, well, this guy not only cared about doing his job, he also cared about the person that was going to take his job when he got promoted. So that shows a lot of initiative. That's something that I always consider a plus. Second point that I look at is, does the applicant story make sense? Like Boni said, if someone takes a position and then they end up not delivering what they promised in the interview or being squeezed out due to several other factors, you look at that by seeing, have they been moving up on the resume? Have the positions that they've been taken been more responsibility? Can I tell that they left the job because of another opportunity or because they were just in over their heads, I guess? So second thing that I look at is, does their story have a progression? Do they have a goal in their career? And are they moving towards that? Another one that I have noticed a lot recently, some of the worst interviews that I conducted along with my team would be people that phrase their answers more towards of what can I do, or what can this job give me? interested in this job because it offers me an opportunity to learn. It offers me an opportunity to go into something that I haven't done before. That's a big negative. I think that the best interviews I've had are the ones in which someone says, I'm interested in this job because I noticed that you're moving into this area and I have a lot of experience in this field. My past experience dealing with this type of issue would be an asset to your team because of this. Even if the applicant just frames that same question, what they can do for the position just completely changes the tone of the interview. Huge plus. And then finally, how good does the applicant or how well their questions are at the end. So at the end of every interview, you always get the typical, what questions do you have for me? Like the presentation that Mr. So and Mr. Kim put together, it's also a chance for the applicants to evaluate the company. Depending on how good these questions are, that can be another chance for the applicant to leave a positive in it. Did they do their homework? Are the questions that they ask you, for example, what is the company's roadmap? Is that something that shows that they know what the company is doing now with the company doing the future? Don't underestimate the potential that asking good questions at the end can do to improve your chances. I think these 4 points, from my experience, have been some of the key things that I look at. I hope they're useful to you as well.
Thanks. Would both of you, both Bonnie and Alonso, or Mr. Nam and Mr. Guzman, would you guys be able to comment, since you've both mentioned some overlapping areas, what would you say is a good way for all of these students to research more about the job opportunities and people they're interviewing with? For example, is it just straight Google or Facebook or LinkedIn, web reviews, dumpster diving, trash records? How do you suggest a student find out enough about a company to prepare well for an interview? Maybe you can share some experiences that you've come across.
So the way that from job hunt strategic point of view, I always divided it into 2 categories. First category is a list of companies that are like my dream companies. You know, you can put blue chip companies, you know, like Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, Cisco, you know. Those are the companies that while I was in business school, I dreamed to work for because I read so many case studies. I read the memoirs of the CEO. Like there was a time when I was reading either the memoirs of the biographies of Jack Welch from GE, unauthorized biographies of Jeff Bezos from Amazon, Steve Jobs. I became very obsessed that those were the companies that one day I wanted to call home. And out of my own personal interest, I just did a lot of research on them. I also have a mobile app that gives me information about stocks. And in that, not only do I follow the company's performance, but also the news, the current news of what's going on, what major breakthroughs they're having, or what kind of litigation they're having, or what new products they launched that has completely disrupted the field. You have to know what are the current challenges that the company is experiencing, because when you bring that up at the company during the interview, you can tie that into what you would bring to the table and how that can contribute to overcoming the challenges that the company is experiencing at that particular moment. So that's my first basket of my dream companies. The second basket is basically a laundry list of leading companies in the fields in the industries that I'm interested in. And I have not been so passionate to do a deep dive into all those companies. So yes, I will look into Google. I will of course, if I'm called for an interview, if I go past the first screening phone call with an HR person, and then they want me to interview with somebody, I'm going to do my homework. But reading the news from Wall Street, if this is a publicly traded company, you have to know what's going on right now. What are the challenges and what are the victories? I usually go into company websites like vault.com, where they give you evaluations of companies based on employee reviews for work-life balance and environment and all, like infrastructure of the company and all that. So that really helps. Places like Universum, the company I told you about, that every year they publish a list of employer branding, you know, and they have a way to evaluate companies that indicates if this is a good company to work for and how employees are happy. Because that is also something that I have talked about when I interview, when people ask me, why do I want to work here? And I will tell them, well, for example, Boston Consulting Group has been ranked #1 in employee satisfaction for almost over a decade. Why? Well, because they give work-life balance, competitive salary, empowerment, there's a career track, and all those things are very important for me because I'm not just looking for a salary. I am looking for a place that I can call my professional home, where I can grow, and my contribution here is going to help the company grow as well.
And I think for me, the #1 resource is, I guess, each other. In your case, keeping in touch with all of your college or grad school or work colleagues is invaluable to finding a lot of opportunities. I remember I was working at IBM, for example, they had a system for advertising jobs, but it was common knowledge that by the time they advertised the job, they already had which candidates they wanted to bring in mind. So if you guys keep in contact with all of your college classmates as you progress throughout your careers, I think it'll be a huge resource to learning about which jobs are available now, which jobs are going to become available. If, for example, whenever one of my classmates from Duke that was interviewing for a job in Samsung US wanted to learn about the position, he contacted me, explained to him what Samsung is working on now, what impression I have of that team, the people that I knew on that team. Therefore, when he applied to that position, he had a lot of things to say that weren't just found on the Samsung website. So giving a call to the people that you know that work in this company beforehand will really prepare you for the interview, and just keeping in contact with your colleagues will let you know about the opportunities.
Thank you very much for that. I understand, Julian, you may have a couple of questions.
Well, before speaking the questions, we have a quiz. If you want, we can run it, or we can return to this
We're out of time. Can we do it quickly? We have time to do it quickly?
Yes, it's easy questions. Maybe in 5 minutes it can be ready if you just start it from the pool.
I don't know if Bonnie and Alonso will have time to stick around for that. Are there any other? I will start the quiz now, but as I start the quiz, since Mr. Guzman and Mr. Nam may need to leave, are there any other students that have questions for these guys before they leave? Going once, going twice.
Can I have
okay. Ali, yes, do you have a question?
Yeah, actually, I'm really feel thank you for all of these things that I heard today from Mr. Boninam and Mr. Alonso. So I wanna ask the questions about how do you find the staff who matches with the company's value without knowing that they actually not really match, but because they're just trying to get a job. Because I know that finding the person who is really matched with the company value is not easy. So I want to ask your advice about which kind of questions, or how do you just trying to find a good person in the same company's value? Because I have trying to interview for a while, but as not from the human resources management team, but as a marketing team, I'm really frustrated with that because I'm not really good at like when I see some people and I just like know all about them. It's not easy at all like this. So I really want to get advice from two of you about this part. Yeah.
So if I can go first, two things that have helped me, not only through college, grad school, and in my career is how to deliver a presentation. And this is something that, at least here in Asia, it's a skill that is not really at the forefront in the rank of priorities. Like what I see a lot, when I went to grad school here in Korea, I went to Yonsei. People are reading notes. That's how they deliver a presentation. In the US, the PowerPoints, they don't have much text. They just have a few bullet points and maybe an illustration, but the presenter is basically just speaking to the audience, engaging the audience, sometimes even improvising to somebody's comment and just free flowing with it. You know, there is this concept that is very important for Google founders, Larry and Sergey, that when they interviewed Eric Schmidt, who eventually became the CEO of Google, they took him to Burning Man. Burning Man is this crazy show in the middle of the desert in the US where people do, there's music, drum lines, all kinds of crazy stuff. You can look it up.
Yeah.
And what they observed is when they decided to hire him, it was because he had flow. He was able to connect with the collective. So that's just an example of how important fit is. But in particular, you as an interviewee, you have to be able to not only engage with the interviewer, but connect with something in particular about that interviewer that he may have made as a side comment. Connect with that, look for it. And so I'm talking about two things here, is learn how to present. Have a fluidity of thought that allows you to also have a fluidity of speech. Look at them. I mean, I'm not saying stare at their eyes like you're trying to hypnotize them, but look at them in the face. And in Asia, it's something that a lot of times is considered bad manners, like looking at somebody in the face when you have to actually look down out of respect. So you're going to have to negotiate that according to the context, right? Presentation skills is important, but what I would recommend to you is write down the most commonly asked questions. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Why do you want to join our company? And just start writing down your answer. And sometimes it's going to be a one-page answer, but over time, you're going to continue polishing that into a one-paragraph answer. The more you work on it, the more you think about it, when somebody asks you that question, you can give them the elevator pitch, like a salesman. You can give them the whole speech in less than a minute with the full confidence of somebody who has thought about this answer in depth. Because a lot of times people walk in there and when somebody asks you a question, it's like you're caught like a deer in the headlights. Like whenever I asked at the beginning, you know, why are manholes round? And nobody would answer. Companies want the people who jump at the chance to take that microphone, to take that podium and take charge. And in this example, I didn't see a lot of people wanting to jump at the occasion to take the spotlight. You want to have that spotlight because if you're not somebody who wants to take the driver's seat, then you're just a passenger. And companies don't necessarily want to have passengers on their team. They want people who want to take charge. And that reflects in the way that you communicate. I don't know if that answered your question.
Thank you.
I think
Thank
it's
you so
very,
much.
I think it's very good. Yes,
Yeah.
Alonso, did you have one last thing to share before we wrap things up? I didn't want to take you guys too long.
I guess I'll make it quick again. Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, if you look for someone's story, I mean, that's a really good indicator of where they're going, what their mentality is. Same applies to you. So when you speak to someone that's interviewing you, just make sure that you understand your own story well and you can create that story. I worked in this field because I was interested in this, but then I took that second job because an opportunity arose from a client that I had worked with that enjoyed my work and I got along with them. And after that, I changed careers because I had already done some of that work and it made sense to go deeper into it. So if you have a story that progresses and makes sense, it'll answer the question to the interviewer as why are you here today? If you have that down, I think you'll have a much stronger performance in the interview.
Thank you very much for that. I guess I'm honored to say thank you very much for helping us today, interacting. Now that we're wrapping up, we've had an amazing opportunity to interact, and we still have an amazing ability to interact this semester. You guys are visiting professors with our class this semester. Students should definitely appreciate this opportunity, and as you both say, be proactive. Start planning your future, building your career, building your stories that you want to grow. Research about these guys, research about your dream jobs. Use this class opportunity to develop maybe an interaction, a project with these guys so you can learn more about them, learn more about their colleagues, learn more about what is the fit in the company. Does it fit you? So thank you very much, Mr. Boninam and Alonso Guzman, for talking with us today. We look forward to staying in touch this semester. We are honored to have you as visiting professors. These students will definitely develop their proactivity and questions. We are almost at the midway point. Some of them have developed quite a lot of their research. They may be contacting you soon to start sharing their fit. So thank you very much for joining us today, guys. Please, class, give me a hand helping thank these guys.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Nam, Mr. Guzman.
Thank you.
Thank you.